For this video, I will be explaining the entire rest of my project. Now this again will be another long video, so if you wish to speed this up, don't forget you can just change the playback speed to like a bit higher so you can speed it up. Anyway, um, so what will be first explained is how my menu system works and my UI. So if I click play, you can see what's happening here. And so, first things first is to explain about these two intros. Now, they are pretty much the exact same because I only wanted to show two different images, of course. One of them being my box head model. Yes, it's a model. If I go like this, you can actually see the model. And next is the intro, which shows the neatly packaged image as is here. Anyway, um, so there's that. So the script I want to show is on regards to the intros. Now these two are just carbon copies. They are intro 1 and then intro 2. They are carbon copy scripts, of course. Except one of them is to load the next scene, which is intro scene 2, and the next one is to load the next scene, which is the main menu. So what happens is, I might as well just show in one part. In the start of the scene, it will start the coroutine. Now what this does is it waits 3 seconds to load the next scene. That is pretty much what is shown in this part in general. But the fade system, if I can find it, has an image, a black image that will go ahead and fade. Now, if I go on the canvas or the main camera, I'm not too sure where exactly this is. Directional light. Ah, yes, there we go. So in the script, of course, it shows that. Now, what exactly happens is it will go ahead and play the animation of this image. It will just go ahead and straight show the as a black screen, fade by changing the color transparency of the alpha, and then of course after a couple of seconds it will do this. That's all this does. There's no balls in or specific type of things for an animator in this part. As you can see, there's no actual animator for it. But the main menu, I'll go explain that just now. So in the main menu, if we go to the scene, it's again another black square which has its separate animations this time. Now, this is because, of course, if we go on the thing itself, it needs a ball for pressed. Now, what it means by this is that let's say I go towards the main menu. In the canvas, there are two buttons: the start button and the quit button. Now, these buttons have their own different things, and what they'll do is they'll link towards the open game script. Now, if I go on this script by going like this, go to here, I can remove these two now. The open script will go ahead and link towards the animator. And it will, of course, again, link towards it when you start the project and ensure that once you click, so going back again, different parts here are different types of voids. Now, what these will do is, as explained in these parts, the go game part will set the press animation to true and then start the coroutine, which is down here, which loads the game. That's what is used here, of course. And then, of course, things like the back menu and the back game, I'll explain in just a moment. But for now, the quit goes ahead and does the same thing, where it will allow the animation to play and then quit the game. Though one thing to note, of course, is the fact one thing I might want to do is I might want to create a brand new numerator in here with the application quit in it, because when I built the game, I realized that this waiting doesn't really work, and I'm not too sure why. But anyway, if we continue. So again, shown there, and going back to these parts, the back menu and the back game is used for the two different scenes that's for the win. If we go to the win screen, we can go ahead and see what exactly this is. And all it is simply just text with a background thanks to the camera changing it, as you can see there. And what will of course happen is, as explained in the previous video, the blank will change based on the timer, but the part that's important is the menu and retrack. Now these will have a button part towards them that will again link towards the script. And what will happen is, as is used in every single one of these that have a button, they'll link towards it, and then you can go to here and select which one you want. As is for the retry, I'll go use the back game, then things like the back to menu will go to back menu, and the other two scenes will use go game and quit game. And that is simply just how the UI is done. It's super simple and easy to understand, and there shouldn't really be any issues besides the, if you want to add a fade in, of course, the coroutines are a bit iffy on if they work or not. So that's that problem, of course. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on to the next aspect, which is my camera. Now, in the level in general, if I load it up and put it to 2D, there are two different cameras. We've already explained how these work, but they do have a pixel perfect camera, which I haven't explained before, which is why I'm explaining it now. That what this does, it will go ahead and, let's say if I disable it now, it will go ahead and make the main camera the old format, which is this. Now, of course, that means that you can see past some different parts, and the quality of things like the player will kind of be poor. Now, what the Pixel Perfect camera does is, once you enable it, it will again zoom in towards the correct size and will allow the pixel quality to stay decent. Of course, you can adjust it to make it perfect, but that requires you zooming in further. And as you can see here, we have the things like how this will go ahead and change the resolution to whatever you set it to be, and this is what will allow the camera to detect how many pixels it should see in per area. And of course, this green area represents the resolution. And the pixel snapping allows the camera to not be smooth, except that this time the camera moves per pixel. So let's say you have your grid, the camera will be moving per pixel instead of being more of a smooth transition between. Now, of course, the crop frame allows the camera to crop into this resolution. If I disable it, you'll go ahead and see what happens here. It goes back to the original camera resolution. Of course, it's good, but then the Pixel Perfect camera doesn't tend to work properly. Which is why, for this case, I enable it. And the reason why you don't enable stretch fill is because it will go ahead and blur most of your image. If I zoomed in towards the player, you can see what I mean. So of course, that is why I disable you. Another thing is that I tend to disable this section because what this does is occasionally it kind of ruins the Pixel Perfect camera. Of course, if you had at a higher resolution and enable it, then that would cause the difference to actually make sense, and it will change, of course, your things to more pixely in general. That is what was used before in my Boxman in the intro scene, with how the pixel perfect camera would enable this, allowing the model to turn pixelated. Except now I've come to realize that that is a kind of a problem and it doesn't really work too well, so I kind of left it out now. Anyway, going back again towards these canvases. So I have two separate canvases because one of them is linked towards the E key. Now I want it to be like this is it because in the script for what I mentioned before in the previous video, it will disable the game object E key. And so what I did now is that separate it so that the script isn't in this area. And this canvas is used for this tutorial guide. This part isn't needed, but it's good for when I want to build my game and share it across to different people. It allows them to understand the controls easier and them to easily learn how different parts work. And that's why I've sectioned this to be section needs to be world space, because if you enable it to be more as is shown in this section, then the canvas will be resized based on how you do it. I did a problem there where I didn't actually resize this into the place beforehand. But anyway, if you set it towards a screen space overlay or screen space camera, it can be good, but then there are a few issues that can happen, so I just ignored it and set it to real world space. Anyway, going on further along, next is the police officer. That's the next part to explain. So the police officer, I will go ahead and quickly just show the script and then I'll explain them. Now, what is the police officer is that there are two separate scripts, of course. One is the player detect, which I've explained before, but this video will go about the switch direction aspect. Now, what happens here is that whenever you start it, of course, there are two different floats based on the start time of the animations and then the end time. And then it will link towards game objects of left and right and the animator, and then the bool used for whenever you're going to do the different parts. And the star is again to disable everything and then make sure that the current time is set to the starting time that is there. So what happens is that in the update, the current time will go down based on time. And these different parts here are regards to his animations and the left and right collisions. So basically how this is that once you start, if the timer is between 10 and 9, it will go ahead and make sure that the done drink is disabled, which is for later on. But the left collision is disabled and the right one is. And then, of course, then from there, it will make sure that the bool is true so that it can go ahead and do the beginning animation where he drinks up. This will lock him into this point until it starts doing the waiter. Now, the waiter, of course, down here is that it just waits 1 second. So it will wait 1 second, and then it will enable the spin, which causes him to go down and then spin. That will allow him to spin the other direction facing the left side, which is towards these parts. If the time is between these seconds, then it will go ahead and make sure that it will disable the spin so that it can't just keep doing the spins, and it will make sure that the original drinks have been disabled. And again, it will enable the left instead of the right this time. And then from here, we have the aspect of if it's between these two parts after that, it will go ahead and it will make sure that the drink down 2 is disabled, so that this time when he's facing the other direction, this part gets enabled so that he does that, and then starts again another spin and go back to the original animation. This part here is about the collisions. Now I've added it here because there's a slight issue with its timing, that the animation will tend to so of course in this section, of course, the collisions for the left and right will be enabled, except that without that part down there, it tends to be a delay, so that when he does turn back to the right side, after a couple seconds will the collision enable. And then, so what this does is it makes sure that if it's in the section of when he's put his hand down after he's spun to the right side, it will make sure that the animation is played. Oh wait, sorry, I completely botched it wrong. This is actually to reset the timer and allow the final animation, but this one is as what I was trying to explain before. So this one will go ahead and re-enable the collision correctly on the right time. I apologize for that terrible mistake. So anyway, that should be that for the police officer, because that's all that's left there. It links towards the, if I go onto here, it links towards the left, and links towards the right, and then it links towards the officer's animation, which actually I should show it now, might as well, as is here. And if I unmaximize the thing, you can see how it does it. And let's just say if I move the player first, let's move the player, and let's do this. You can see the player, the officer does his animation. The next thing I want to explain is the camera. With the camera, it's separate from the Boxman. This is because instead of how in the past I would do it so that it's linked to the Boxman, meaning that it's stuck to the exact position of the Boxman area, so if he moves, the camera will move with it. So with it being separate, allows it to have the follow 2D script. Now what this does is it more tracks the Boxman, so that if he moves, the camera will slowly try and track it instead of it being stiff. Now if I go to the script, I can show it a bit more easier. So in here, we have here, of course, linking towards the player, and then the different types of parts of his limits and all. Now, these parts, I might as well explain first. The limits are used for, first, this section, which what basically this does is it will draw a red line, as seen in here. It will draw a, red line that will be the limit of what the camera can do. So basically what happens is, we'll do that in just a moment. So again, the camera, if I unmaximize this, has a limit so that it can't go past these sections. That's why you can't see past this part. And so if I move the Boxman, you can clearly see how it's locking itself on these sections. Now, first I will just explain the main camera itself, in that in the script, what it does is it will lerp towards the positions of what you set it to, which is how the start position is set to where the camera starts, and that the end position is linked towards where the player is located at. And then basically from there, it will smoothly move towards the player based on the time offset that I've set it to. The more times offset you give it, the faster the camera will move. That's why if I set it slow, then the camera will slowly move towards it rather than go towards the player. Now, what these parts do is they will clamp. Now, what the clamp does is what is shown in before, where the camera gets locked from. Sorry about that. I will go back and show the script. So, of course, here links towards the player, here links towards the camera start, and then this part will smooth remove it, and the clamps. So the clamps will prevent the camera from moving from where the limits are, as seen here. And this is basically used in every single part here that I will go and explain in just a moment. And so here we are. This is a bonus thing that I made myself rather than using the tutorial. With the tutorial that I had, it taught me how these parts work. Except that one thing I wanted to get done was the camera to be able to move further from what you can see. Now, if I go onto this part here, this is an unusable script that's not shown in the game at all. Now, it's still here because it's good to reference a piece of work that I spent working on that ended up not working the way I wanted to. So, the best way to explain this script is that what it does is if you link it towards, let's say, a circular game object, if you link the script towards that and connect it towards the camera, what we'll do, well, as in general, the circle will track the mouse and will move smoothly towards the mouse's position. Now, then, of course, if you did move the game object of the camera towards the game object of that, then the camera will technically smoothly move towards it. It was good. Besides, there were a couple problems that you have to make sure that your mouse is in the center of the screen now, because it's basically set to what the camera would be like, rather than in general. So there was a few problems with that, and then the next problems was that this entire script kind of messed with my tracking camera that is used here. So that's why this entire script is completely unused in my project. But if I just go close you now, we can go ahead and explain this part. So what happens is these are all the different keys for left, right, up, down, arrows. And what they will do is, as you can see here, it will change the post offset of a specific X or Y, and allowing it to move further or behind on the offset. That is all that really changes, and what this does is basically it's just using this exact script on each part too. So if I showcase this by going onto the project, you can see what I mean. How if you go up and I make sure that we are here, you can see the post offset is traditionally set to 1, and that allows the camera to not be, exactly down where the player is, and it's more slightly above the player. It's a good way to make the game feel better with its camera instead of how it is normal. So in general, if I go ahead and change this myself, you can see the post offset will basically change of how far away it wants to track the Boxman. And so what I did there was I found that was a thing. So I used it for this so that when you, for example, press down the right key, it will change the post offset so that it will extend further. And if you go up, then it will go upwards, and down to go down, and then left to go left. But because I'm over here, you cannot see that actually working. And then this, of course, allows you to go up left and down left too, so that these parts work. And this is a great script that I am proud that I have figured out, because I never used the tutorial for these key options, and I just used the tools from that tutorial to my advantage. And I'm surprised that I didn't screw it up. And I'm surprised of how little amount of problems there have been with this script in general. But the next thing to show is something that I forgot about, was the zoomed aspect. As explained in the previous video, what happens is when you go to this front and press E, it will disable the main camera instead to the zoomed camera. And the reason why there's an extra section of a red limit is because this camera can go past further, allowing the camera to more accurately track that area specifically. And what I've done is, to make it zoomed in, is I've just increased this pixel per unit that allow it to zoom in. Though this also means one thing, is that it can actually detect more pixels in quality. So that's why the Boxman looked high quality in the previous video. I forget some of these things actually are a thing with that. And there isn't really a script separate from this camera to that camera, except of course that the bottom limit is more, as seen here. There is nothing else different about this camera. It is just used for the vent part to work. And after that is the tracker, which is used for what again? This is used for the E key, right? Yes, this is. Now, I didn't explain this before, but with the image of the E key comes with a tracker script. Now, what this does is it basically just makes sure that it moves this object towards the camera position, which is the tracked object. Or more accurately, in this case, I actually set it to the player, so that it tracks where the player is, rather than the camera. Because then, if I had it set to the camera, no matter where the Boxman is, the E will pop up in the center, which is not what I want. So what I did was I connected to the Boxman, because then it will be slightly above where the Boxman is. And from then on out, there's that, and it disables from that, as explained in the previous video. What after that is there to show? The death zone. Now, this is the final thing I can explain in my project, because this should be it. Now, the death zone is basically using similar codes towards the spawn point, except that it's altered to move him towards a fall point. Now, if I go onto my project section, which I forgot, I just realized, this has a death zone which is linked towards the script. Now, what this does is it will make sure that if it's connected towards the player, well, if it's connected towards the hide tag, it will go ahead and move the Boxman player to the fall point, which the fall point is just here, because I didn't want it set to the spawn point, because players found it. Well, a couple of my close friends told me about how it would seem a lot fairer if you fell down here, you'd be teleported next to a hideable area, rather than at the beginning, because that would seem unfair. So I moved it to like that, so that of course it moves the player to there. So for example, if I go ahead and start, and I grab the Boxman. So let's just moving up here for now while I do this. So once he's in this area and he falls down, he moves over here. That allows him to be able to hide in a nice spot to avoid the officer. And of course, when you get caught by the officer, you get teleported to the spawn point. I forgot to show that in the previous video. I believe I did, at least. And the script is as followed, simply just like this. Again, it's just a carbon copy, except that this time it's changed the spawn point to fall point. That is all that is really shown in this. And from there, we have successfully explained every mechanic that my game has. and I've explained my UI, and I've explained all the problems that I've mostly faced when designing these things. It is currently taking me 60 minutes to explain both videos together. That just shows the amount of work I have put onto my project, and I hope that I've explained my struggles and my solutions very well, because if I have not, then I do not know how to explain things even more than I already have. But with that, that should be the end of my videos. Except from my evaluations for my site work, of course, which I'm still going to do. But from there, that should be it. And I hope I get to see you again when I evaluate my site work. And I hope that you have learnt a lot from my explanations. That'll be all.